All right, let's just jump right in. What happens after we die? I mean, it's probably the biggest question out there, right? Today, we're going to try to map out this specific timeline of the afterlife, at least according to the biblical texts we'll be looking at. Look, if you've ever felt a little fuzzy on the Christian view of the afterlife, you are definitely not alone. I mean, do our souls just sleep? Is there an instant judgment? What's this about a temporary state? You hear all these different ideas. Our goal today is just to focus on one clear sequence that's described in the source material we're digging into. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with what happens right after death. Then we'll talk about this idea of a temporary afterlife, move on to the big final events like resurrection and judgment, and then land on the two eternal destinations the texts talk about. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so our journey starts, well, at the end of life, the moment of death. And according to the source material, it's not like everyone gets on the same train. It's more like an immediate fork in the road. Two very, very different journeys kick off right from the get-go. So you're probably asking, okay, what determines which path someone takes? And the answer, at least in these texts, is incredibly direct. It boils down to one thing and one thing only, whether a person has received Jesus Christ as their Savior. That's it. That one decision is presented as the key that unlocks everything that comes next. Okay, so for the believer, here's what happens. It's a really crucial distinction. The moment they die, their soul, their spirit, it immediately goes into the presence of God. The text says, at home with the Lord. But, and this is important, their physical body stays here, in the grave, described as sleeping, until a future resurrection. So you've got this immediate spiritual connection, but the physical part comes later. Now, on the flip side, the journey for the unbeliever is, well, completely different. Their soul or spirit also goes somewhere immediately, but it's described as a temporary place of judgment and torment. It's a state of anguish, for sure. But here's a really key point. This is not the final hell. Think of it more like a holding place. And that idea of a holding place brings us to a really important concept for understanding this whole timeline. It's often called the intermediate state. So, what exactly is that? So, the intermediate state, think of it as the in-between time. It's the period between someone's death and the final resurrection. It's not forever, it's temporary, but it's a place where souls are consciously existing, waiting for what's next. And while both believers and unbelievers are said to be in this state, what they experience there, well, it's night and day. So for the believer, this in-between time is described as being filled with conscious joy and peace. That passage from 2 Corinthians gives us the picture, being at home with the Lord. So it's a place of comfort, of fellowship, of rest, even though they're still waiting for their physical body. And the contrast for the unbeliever, it is absolutely stark. The source material points to that famous story about the rich man in the Gospel of Luke, remember? He cries out, "I am in agony in this fire." So this depicts their time in the intermediate state as one of conscious suffering. It's like a preview of the final judgment. But this temporary state, no matter how long it goes on for, isn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. The source material describes a whole series of huge final events that finally bring this whole in-between phase to a close. Okay, so here's the sequence laid out in the texts. You've got the time in the intermediate state, and then two different resurrections. First up, believers are resurrected, and they get these glorified, eternal bodies. Then, later, unbelievers are resurrected, but it's to face a final judgment. And it's only after all of this happens that the eternal destinies are locked in for good. Let's just zoom in on these two resurrections for a second. The first one, that's for believers. They're called blessed and holy. This is the big moment when their sleeping body gets raised, totally transformed, and reunited with their soul forever. Then there's the second resurrection. This one's for unbelievers. They also get a body, but for a very different reason, to stand at the final judgment. That's where the book of Revelation says they'll be judged according to what they had done. So, we've gone through the intermediate state, we've gone through the resurrections and the judgments, and now, finally, we get to the end of the line, the permanent, eternal destinations. And you know, according to the source material, after all that, after everything is said and done, it all comes down to just two possibilities, two irreversible outcomes. There's no spectrum, no do-overs, just two final options. So for believers, their final home is described as the new heavens and new earth. Just imagine a completely renewed, perfect creation where they get to live in those glorified bodies forever. For unbelievers, the final destination is called the lake of fire, and the book of Revelation calls this the second death, which is understood to mean just eternal separation from God. So you see the thread running through all of this, right? The crucial point it all comes back to is this. The entire timeline, from the moment you die to where you end up forever, it all hinges on that one single decision made back at the very beginning. The path you take is determined solely by whether or not you've trusted in Jesus Christ for salvation. And that really leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The biblical texts we've looked at lay out this incredibly clear, singular dividing line that determines this whole eternal journey. So the question isn't just about the afterlife, is it? It's, if that's the framework, how does that perspective change the way you think about life today, right here, right now?